Hello and welcome back, everyone, to an episode of the Adam Hazara Show here on a nice little Monday evening here on March 31st, 2025. Again, we got a lot of good things once again to talk about today here on the pod. We're going to be recapping a second week of Lake Braddock Baseball and softball action. We're going to be going over all the games, some pretty big matchups on both sides, as well as we're going to be previewing week 3 matchups, especially a big weekend for Lake Braddock Baseball, taking on a very good Alexandria City team, big matchup over in the Patriot District, and of course, some big games versus West Potomac, and then an out-of-district matchup versus the reigning 6A champions, Indian McLean Highlanders, in a state quarterfinals rematch from last year. So a big game over there at McLean next Saturday. On the softball side, some matchups this week coming up against West Potomac and Alexandria City, just like baseball has. Also going to be recapping some of their games last week, as well as surprising loss to West Springfield. And then they had some wins over Hayfield and then their district opponent in Woodson. So we're going to get into all that today. Before we start, make sure you guys please like and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to share this with a friend. Greatly appreciated. Make sure to turn on notifications so you do not miss another episode of the show right on here. And if you want to be part of the conversation, please join the chat below for your comments and questions. So without further ado, let's get it started. Here today on episode 21 on the Adam Hazara Show. So we're going to start off here on a baseball side of things. So of course, Lake Braddock in baseball coming off a pretty big week, couple games, a 7-4 loss to their arch nemesis, West Springfield Spartans. Bruins took their first loss of the season on Tuesday, and then they bounced back with a 14-3 Mercy Rule win over a very bad Woodson team. Of course, we're going to get into the most important game here, is that West Springfield game. Now, you knew coming into this game that this was going to be a huge test for this Bruins team that is, a lot younger this year, having a lot of our players stepping up, and was kind of, gonna, maybe mold their identity a bit more. And again, this is a big test for Bruins in a sense that if they beat the West Springfield Spartans, their arch nemesis, that it would be a big confidence booster and show that the Bruins can keep up with just the best, or as good of any teams out there in the district, which is where most of it is going to lie in 6C. You never have to worry about national district, of course, but and it was a close game. It was only a 7-4 loss, but I will tell you, here's my thoughts on the game. So first of all, you had Leo DeLomo start that game, coming off a rough start versus South County a week prior, where he gave up 5 earned runs on opening day. This game, seemingly he did struggle again. 7 earned runs in his second start of the season, got another loss, and for a second straight start, he did not look like the pitcher that the Bruins want him to be. He's kind of like, a top-end guy. Of course, he did show signs of being better. He did keep the Bruins in the game to a point where, that they could actually get the lead. West Springfield run up early in that game by a couple runs. Bruins were able to hit the South Carolina commit, Aaron Dirks, for a couple runs. It will figure him out, once maybe their second time through the order. But then DeLomo, seemingly struggled a little bit after he settled in after kind of a rough first inning or two that game. And then, unfortunately, the one guy that they couldn't keep off, the hitting board was Caleb Williams, of course, the Liberty commit and shortstop for the Spartans. Hits a 3-run home run, go-ahead shot, and I think it was like the 4th or 5th inning of that game to give the Spartans 5-4 lead. They take DeLomo out. Jack Cavalario comes in, who's been amazing to start the season. Talk about what a start he's been off to. And he gives up a couple runs on a base hit. But the runners DeLomo was responsible for, so the earned runs went to him. Cavalario still pitched pretty well. A few scoreless innings down the stretch. There was a moment where it seemed like he was going to give up couple of runs, but I believe in a 6th or 7th inning, but then there was a call back on it for interference. I think the ball hit the runner, so Bruins got lucky there. Bruins were able to muster up a few runs, of course, off Dirks. Get 4 runs, and then Miles Thompson came in for West Springfield. They're kind of like their number 2 guy behind Dirks, and he was lights out of the bullpen. 3 innings, scoreless, and I believe he struck out 5 in those 3 innings of work. And he go away with the save in that one. And Bruins end up losing their arch rival 7-4. Offense seemed to do a pretty, kind of a decent job. Of course, there are some things to adjust to. But again, it was a good game in the sense, the Bruins, despite the fact that they lost, they can still, it was only the 3rd game into the season. They can really use that loss to propel themselves up forward. Have a lot of negative takeaways from that game, and I see them early. They'll have a lot more time to prepare next time for West Springfield, any of these tough teams, especially like Alexander City, McLean coming up, as I said in the opening. And so they kind of got some identity issues out of the way. I think that West Springfield loss is going to give them a lot of things to go over, since it's a very good team that's going to show Bruins a lot of their flaws. And so hopefully they can use that loss in a way this week that's going to help them against some very tough Alexander City and McLean teams especially. I did get, of course, that good 14-3 win over Woodson on Friday. A couple of notes to take away from that game. Matt Shape continues to hit really well. He's kind of the leading player in that 2026 class that the Bruins have. That's massive, and that is really good, really talented. I think he has a 900 OPS start off the year. A few guys, multiple hits. Of course, I think the one standing guy, Matthew Holcomb, who started off the season a little bit cold on the hitting side. 4-hit game, so you're hoping that he continues that up as a Bruins new right fielder this year, position where they need a lot of offense compared to last year, where it was not good with Crandall, who's benched now, of course. And of course, Bo Padgett in that game had a pretty good start. Struggled a little bit in early going. I think only allowed 1 earned, a couple of other runs that the Cavaliers scored on errors. So the Bruins pitcher wasn't really exactly at fault for that. Yeah, again, he pitched another good game. He's rolling for the first couple of games. And so it's kind of get on to what we expect this week. So tomorrow, big matchup with Alexandria City. And, that's an Alexandria City team that's led by a lot of talent. You got the Bucknell commit, William Jones, who probably is lined up to pitch. I know Jason Kruchek, the ECU commit, who is not going to be starting that game. He pitched versus West Potomac on Friday in an 8-2 win, pitched 3 scoreless innings in that one. He'll be starting. He'll be still a big part of the lineup for him, though. You have William Jones, though. I know he's kind of been in and out of games this year. I don't know if he's dealing with an injury or what, but if he pitches tomorrow, it's going to be a hard matchup for Bruins. Bruins have had some experience against him. He's been very tough against the Bruins at times. Of course, started against them in the region quarterfinals last year. Was pitching well against the Bruins, but then later going, he had that game. He had some fastball command problems, and so Bruins ended up winning 9-3. And they were able to blow it open off Noah Sternberg in that game. I don't know why does that stay coming up? This is another big opponent, and you can't say that's just Braddock and West Springfield in the Patriot District and Occoquan region anymore. Usually it's just those 2 teams every year. Maybe occasionally we have like Woodson or West Potomac creep up on one of those 2 teams and say, hey, we're competitors. I guess you want to say Robinson too, but they've not really been that competitive in baseball either. It was maybe year in, year out, Lake Rock and West Springfield. That's no longer the case. This Alexander City team is a real deal. They got some other really good, talented players. Matthew Rallis at catcher, Tommy Kokot, Cooper Oval, Connor Pollock, J.D. Bowden. Overall, very, very solid core of players over there, and a team that could definitely go toe-to-toe with, Bruins or West Springfield. And so, it's going to be, again, a very hard matchup for Bruins, kind of similar to that West Springfield game. This is the game for Bruins. They need some momentum. They're still looking for that key win this season as well against a very good team like West Springfield, like in Alexandria City. So, why does that stake for this game? And I will say again, between the 2 Bruins starters have been this season, and Padgett and Delomo. Padgett has been good. Of course, talk about Delomo's struggles. He has not been that kind of ace pitcher that the Bruins have wanted him to be. And you talked about Jack Cavalario earlier, how he's starting off really well. He has a sub-1 ERA and quite a few strikeouts to begin his season with several innings he's pitched. Here's what I think. The Bruins need to go with a hotter hand. And they need to give the ball to Cavalario tomorrow to start. Now, like I said, maybe last week, Delomo with West Springfield, you may be saying, maybe it was just a one-off with South County that he, maybe he struggled. We'll give him another chance versus West Springfield. Maybe second time's a charm will do. Unfortunately, it was not the case, but you need to start Cavalario. You have to give yourself momentum right away. Again, this is not an Alexandria City team that is, no slouch anymore. Coach Order has done a great job turning around that program ever since it's come over from Bishop Ireton 2 years ago. Well, a really good team, one of the better teams in the area. Again, is definitely a second strong competitor to West Springfield. They have become a massively big rival of Lake Braddock. So tomorrow night, the Bruins should be starting Cavalario. This is a game where you can't mess around. Also, you need to keep up in the standings with one of these two teams. You need a big statement win. So if I'm Coach Thompson and Bruins, I'm going to Jack Cavalario, the guy who's been more consistent. He's going to get you strikeouts, gives you more, which gives you another option for outs. He's been very solid, has had some very crisp stuff this year, has that really good curveball that works against both sides of the plate. Cavalario is the best bet tomorrow. And the reason why the Bruins like Delomo more, or maybe not necessarily like him more, but the reason they've been going with him is because they want Cavalario at the back end in the bullpen pitching. And they have no plans to pitch Bo Padgett. And here's the thing made tomorrow. This might be a game where you have to maybe pitch both Cavalario and Bo Padgett, your two best pitchers, to start the season. Bo should be available according to VHSL pitch rules in a pitch count. He should be eligible tomorrow. I think it'll be about 4 days since the last day he's pitched, which will be Friday at Woodson. And so you may have Cavalario start the game and then go Bo and late going if it's close. Maybe bring, or at the very least, if you're not going to use Padgett and you're afraid, you're going to overwork him because you want to save him for Friday against West Potomac, which is when he would be scheduled to pitch next, then maybe you use Delomo. Very least, you swap the two spots of Delomo and Cav. You go Cavalario to start. You need a hot hand to start. None of this messing around. You can't take chances with Delomo the way he struggled. You need to go with a hotter hand. You need to go Cavalario. I think it's kind of a no-brainer. You need to go with the hotter hand. You need momentum, especially going against McLean. That's another big game. And maybe save Delomo for West Potomac, but you also see, another point here with Padgett is that, you saw with West Springfield last week, Coach Olms used his two best guys. He used his South Carolina commit to start, and then he didn't waste any time. He wasn't taking any chances. He went to his first team all-region D2 committed pitcher Milo Thompson 3 innings out of the bullpen. And because he knew it was Lake Braddock, he knows, that this is, he knows that Braddock is, West Springfield's arch nemesis, as is the other way around. And so, he wasn't taking ever chances. He knew it was only still a 3-run lead. He knew that, Braddock was going to be tough enough to come back. Coach Holmes, saw that. And so, he wasn't taking any chances. This game also, he can't take any chances. Bruins should be pitching Cavalario and Padgett. And again, you probably will worry about, well, maybe what happens if Bo can't pitch, and you're in a sense that you don't want him to pitch later on because you're going to overwork him. Figure something out. Maybe have Delomo start again versus West Potomac. That's probably the easiest matchup of a 3 you got this coming week. 2 of them are contenders for the state tournament, being Alexandria City and McLean. Again, no messing around. And, you need to stop with this, whole thing with trying to save a better pitcher for late going. Late going doesn't happen for, a few innings? you know, if you need to start things off right away, hot, on all perspectives of your game. Del needs to be demoted to a smaller role for now, whether he's pitching out relief or you save him for a worse opponent. The worst opponent this week they're facing is West Potomac. West Potomac, maybe you're there now. I know their pitching isn't as strong as the other two teams they're facing this week, but again, maybe that's a chance to maybe give Del some chance back on his feet, or if you're up by maybe 4 runs at minimum, maybe that's a chance maybe where you give Del pitch. Maybe he'll be more comfortable out of the bullpen. Maybe he isn't as comfortable with starting. And I understand maybe Bradley DeHay being out has caused, maybe Del wasn't in the initial plan of the Bruins this season before DeHay sprained his UCL. Hopefully Bruins are hoping he'll be back soon. They're going to take it easy with him. So probably only pitch out of bullpen, he'll probably work his way up to being a starting pitcher. That's a really good starting pitcher they got coming back soon. He has yet to make it a pitching appearance for the Bruins this season, of course, with that sprained UCL. And so, maybe it's been causing the Bruins to kind of, make some changes around the area's pitching staff. Padgett was probably going to be the 2 behind DeHay. I feel like DeHay was probably the guy to beat in the staff this year, of course, with Drum and Wiskoski, and seeing all those guys gone. All really good pitchers for Lake Braddock the last few years. And so, Drum, all those guys are gone. And, there's probably been a lot of places where Bruins have, had to make some changes, of course. And, guys have really had to step up. But, really want to step up, you need to probably throw the guy with a hotter hand. That's how you step up. And, again, Bo should be considered pitching tomorrow night. Again, the concern is, I think he'll still be healthy enough to be eligible to pitch. Maybe have him on a smaller workload. Maybe have Del pitch, but you can't be putting Del in a situation like that where you need a big win. Maybe if it was Woodson, maybe it was Robinson, one of those teams, as weak as a team as weak as that. That's where you would want to pitch Del not in a game like this with the way he has struggled first 2 games this season. So, I think it'll be kind of interesting to see if the Bruins do pitch Cavalario tomorrow. Now, if they stick with Del I would not be surprised if they do. But again, it is something strongly worth considering. And this is, that's probably the best move the Bruins could make if they want a big win versus a very good Alexandria City team tomorrow. Another thing I want to talk about before we move on to softball is that the Bruins have a little thing going on with a catcher, of course. Evan Chambers, the freshman catcher, actually didn't start versus Woodson on Friday. And so they actually had CJ Prentice start. I think, maybe the Bruins, with CJ Prentice, the way he's been hitting a couple games this season, also that might be a situation where you probably maybe consider him as an everyday guy for now, whether it's in the catcher spot, DH spot. Bo Padgett's been a DH spot when he's not pitching. He struggled this season. And, we talk about Ryan Harding. He's actually really struggled. He's been starting off the season slow for these first few games of the year. So, CJ Prentice has shown some bright signs early. He's, in his couple starts this year, he's been pretty good, has had some RBIs. And Bruins need more power. If Harding has some pop, if Harding's going to be that middle of the order guy, he's not hitting, then who is going to step up? You need Prentice. And again, I get the concerns with his contact and, the amount of times he's going to strike out. But I think, at very least, it is worth giving him a bit more leisure here where, you should probably start him a few more times and kind of see what he can do. I think, the metrics show, some really good power numbers. And again, I get the metrics on everything, the exit velo and how far you can hit the ball. Again, he's probably going to strike out a lot. But again, I think there's also an argument where you could maybe start him with catcher. This kind of goes back to, him being more experienced in this in team his second year in the program. He knows Bo Padgett more, he knows Jack Cavalario more, knows Leo Deloma more. And so maybe you want him working with, those arms. And then you could probably still have Chambers. Maybe you have Chambers as the designated hitter. He's been off to a good start. I don't think you want to take his bat out, but Chambers, if you're going to have him, maybe have him as a DH and maybe have Prentice, start a catcher for now. I would give him a chance. He's been good in his couple games. He hasn't been striking out a ton. And I think he could, like I said, I've been saying this before. I think if he could probably give you like maybe around a 240, 250 average, driving a good amount of runs, show good enough power numbers, slug the ball well. It doesn't have to be, a 300 average as we've seen in the game in baseball these days. Even if he's a true free outcome guy at minimum, it means he's going to walk, either walk, strike out, or hit a home run. Then I think he could still even be solid enough. I don't think it's going to be a point where he's going to be Joey Gallo. I highly doubt that. And, I believe in Prentice's ability to hit well. So, I think another strong consideration is that the Bruins should may consider Prentice. And I think he could do well enough to at least give you the numbers I just laid out. So, a big matchup with Alexandria City coming up tomorrow. I'll be on a call for that game. Wake Practice Broadcast News Channel, always 6:30. We go live. And then Friday, West Potomac. Of course, you're going to be facing the Virginia Tech guy, Austin Dean, possibly. He's had some walk issues, but I think for Bruins, could probably work, probably have an advantage there with the amount of walks, despite how highly touted he is, does have those walk issues. So I think the Bruins will have an edge there. And West Potomac, in terms of their pitching depth, they probably don't have the best pitchers in the back end of their staff over there. Offensively, they have some good pieces, but, I think, even without Delhomme or Paget or Cavalario or Paget pitching, maybe have Delhomme pitch. Maybe that's a game where you kind of, give him a bit of a breather. And so maybe he can kind of get his stuff back. That's, certainly an option as well. And again, probably the McLean game on Saturday. That's maybe a game where you probably want Cavalario or I think Cavalario would probably be lined up to pitch that game or Delhomme, depending on what the Bruins do. Again, so that's going to be, of course, a very big game at McLean in a rematch, hoping to avenge their loss last year. But again, that's another very tough McLean game right there. Still good enough this year to win another state title. Still big contenders in Class 6. Still have Alex Gonzalez, who of course is first team All-State pitcher. D1 commit to Cincinnati in a Big 12. They have Christian Dre in Richmond, who's coming back. Again, some other very good lineup pieces of Virginia Tech commit. Ethan Ball, who's one of the top senior players in Virginia right now. They have Gabriel Pegas, the star center fielder who can hit the ball 400 plus feet. He's something to watch. Baron Core, great first baseman over there, who's all region, good pitcher too. Aiden Perel, who's really good as a power threat. Jonathan Daly as well. There's definitely some solid pieces in that McLean team to really watch out for. Another pitcher, Dan Ackerman, as well, a very good junior lefty who's great over there for the Highlanders. So very challenging week for this Bruins team with Alexandria City and McLean mostly. But it's going to be a really interesting week for them. We will see what they will do. All right, so we're going to head on over to some Lake Braddock softball talk now. So they played 3 games last week. They played, of course, West Springfield. Kind of a surprising loss there, 9-7. You don't really see the Bruins kind of give up a lot of runs. We'll kind of get into that. But they did pick up 2 straight wins, Hayfield and Woodson. So we're going to talk about that West Springfield game. Very interesting game there. Of course, the big headline in that one was that Bruins ace Mackenzie Verdejo gave up 7 earned runs on 9 hits in a rare subpar outing for her. Now, just because of one bad outing doesn't mean she's a bad pitcher, of course. That was a very good West Springfield offense. I don't think she had her, best night. She probably didn't have her best stuff. And unfortunately, the Bruins did. They tried coming back in the 7th. They were down 9-3. They scored 4, made it 9-7. But unfortunately, they could not come back in that game. And I think, the only thing this says is that, Mackenzie Verdejo is human. We saw her be human for once. We didn't see her, pitch, a bunch of scoreless innings, give up only 1-2 runs at most, which is what she'll give up on average and most outings. and, strike out 30 hitters in the game. But you saw her be a bit off, of course. The offense was still good, as it, you were hoping it was. And so, again, an off game, tough loss against a very good West Springfield team who is probably the competitor to Lake Braddock this year and kind of the other team to beat in that Occoquan region. And so coming up on, that Hayfield game, of course, there was some offense, going on that game over National District, a rare matchup. Now, Verdeo did not pitch. It was Olivia Federico starting. She did pretty well in that game. She, I thought she did pretty decent. 5 earned runs. Yeah, but might have been, what's going on with that. I think there was an inning where there was maybe a couple subpar defensive plays. So you had that going on, but I think overall she kind of gave up. In my book, she gave up 3 earned runs. She was still very solid over there. You have, the Bruins, took care of a National District opponent pretty well, 11-5. Offense went off. A big game for the offense again. That's been, solid this season, even with the, maybe the constant, a lot of changes in the bottom half of that lineup. And of course, Verdejo actually came on and pitched the 6th and 7th inning of that game. It was kind of nice to her to, get back on, see her get back on her feet, give her a couple innings, being up by 6. Bruins were up 11-5 at that point, going into the 6th of that game. And so she pitched a great couple of shutout innings, and she looked to return to form, and then she went out versus Woodson, dominated them again in her career, and then had a big 14 strikeout game, only 1 hit allowed through 5 innings, and Bruins went off. So, so a good week for them, winning 2 of 3. Hopefully bounce back versus West Springfield. Next time, you're hoping that Mackenzie will pitch better, which is the expectation. But I think, she's a good enough pitcher, I think, to where a point where she knows what she did wrong. She'll probably be able to correct it the next time when we face West Springfield in late April. So, this week, of course, a couple games, Alexandria City, West Potomac, 2 pretty easy games in terms of, hitting the pitcher. Because those teams don't really have a lot of pitching depth, especially Alexandria City. They're not really known to have pitching. They're known to be pretty bad. And West Potomac, of course, they had Katie Demmel the last couple of years. They have, they haven't really had a pitcher who's been on her level. Despite the struggles that Demmel had last year as a senior, she at least was a good enough pitcher at times where she could give the Wolverines a big chance to win, as you saw with the run that they kind of made in the district tournament. And so, and she kind of got back to role form that she showed her junior year, where she had a sub-4 ERA and she was really good, and was definitely the team that caused Lake Braddock the most trouble was because of her. She was the main reason for that. And so, but any of the pitchers this year, they don't really seem as good enough to give the Wolverines a solid enough win to the point where they could compete with a higher level team like a Lake Braddock. So again, a couple, they don't really have pitching this year. Pitching depth is pretty subpar again. So, a couple of easy games for Bruins in that one. And then next week, we also have a really easy game at Fairfax. So this is a chance to, get some easier wins on some pretty bad teams and, get some momentum riding. I think this will be really good, really good feeling for the players that they're still kind of even though they're not going to go undefeated in the district this year in the regular season, but still kind of known that they're kind of the top dogs and, dominating most games, especially when it comes to the weaker opponents and, that they still remain a big threat with the firepower they've got. And then I think, of course, the one thing to keep in mind again is that the bottom of the lineup, hopes to continue to do all kind of, 5 through 9. You're hoping that May Bruin, of course, in right field is going to be, continues to be kind of consistent. She's been starting off good this year. Of course, you're hoping that she continues her hot hitting throughout the rest of the season. There's 6 through 9. There's been a lot of lineup changes. except, Eva DuBray, who's been starting at third base. Some better signs for her. She's been hitting a lot better. Been seeing the ball better, adjusting more to pitching at the varsity level. Her numbers have gone up a little bit. Her on-base percentage gone above 340, decent average now. And of course, the Bruins also had, Olivia Federico, Isabella Sevier, who've been doing really well for them. Federico, of course, has been getting some good hits, been getting on base for him, has been consistent these last few games in her appearances. And then Sevier, of course, showing big power threat, hit her first home run the other day, 2-run shot to right center field against Woodson. So you're hoping she's probably the best bet to start at left field for the Bruins right now. Position, seen Sarah Allen, and we never play her to start there. And you saw Federico start at second base for the Bruins. So you're hoping those two will keep up hot hitting, which will probably be their two best players to start right now with all the lineup changes. But DuBray has been handling well even with all the lineup changes. She's had a lot of pressure to produce a bottom half out lineup. She's been handling it a lot better. So 4-game stretch, Bruins should be able to win off these 4 games against a, pretty much where half a district has no pitching. Kind of the same sense again in football. No quarterback, no pitching, for them in the Patriot district right here, about half a district. And, with Bruins, good offense, McKenzie at the helm, they should be able to get back up, still dominate. So, some big weeks coming up for both these teams. Again, a lot to prove for Lake Braddock Baseball. On that side, Lake Braddock Softball, should have some easier games this week. I suppose to wrap it up for today. Make sure you guys leave a like, subscribe. Please share this video with a friend. Turn on notifications to miss our show. We'll see you next time. Thank you.